Hello, and welcome to another episode of Undiscovered Beasts and Strange Phenomena. Please join our experienced and knowledgeable panel of hosts as we explore the great mysteries of our time: Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, and unexplained phenomena.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our show tonight. This evening's guests, we've got some very interesting people on the show, and we're going to talk to them about Champ. Now, Champ is a lake monster in the Michigan area. We're going to hear all about it tonight. But first of all, the reason we're talking about it is because there's been a new film made about Champ. And I've had the opportunity to watch it, and it really is excellent. In fact, the reason we're running this show tonight is precisely because I was so impressed about the quality of this film. So on this show tonight, we have Aleksandar, Scott, and Katy. Aleksandar is the filmmaker and producer. I'm going to talk to him about the film very shortly. And also later on, I'm going to talk to both Scott and Katy, who operate different research teams, about their sighting of Champ, and also what motivates them and their passions, because I'm very interested in the psychology of monster hunters. So first of all, Aleksandar, welcome to the show, and the rest of you, welcome. Thank you very so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Now, the question I have, first of all, for you, Aleksandar, is obviously your film company. Could you tell us a little bit about it and what it specializes in?
Sure. So I'm doing this project for actually Small Town Monsters, which is an independent film company based out of Ohio, run by my friend Seth Breedlove, and they've been doing documentaries for a couple of years now on a variety of cryptid and paranormal phenomena, so ranging from creatures in Ohio, such as the Minerva Monster, to the Beast of Whitehall, all the way to the Mothman of Point Pleasant. So they've done some really groundbreaking documentaries, and I was lucky enough to be invited by Seth to kind of team up with Small Town Monsters and do a production on behalf of Small Town Monsters, which has resulted in On the Trail of Champ.
So the film is On the Trail of Champ, and when will it be out, Aleksandar?
So the release date is June 16th, so that's just about in a couple weeks now. It's going to be on DVD and on streaming online on a new streaming site called VidiSpace, which is by Nick Groff, one of the ghost researchers there. It's kind of a paranormal / cryptid themed streaming site, which is really cool because it caters to the kind of people that would be into this sort of subjects, cryptozoology and the paranormal and the unknown, which is really awesome.
Now, obviously, the company makes lots of different films, but what motivated you particularly to make a film about Champ?
Right, so I've always been interested in lake monsters in particular. I kind of started on this path with a short documentary I did on the Loch Ness Monster called Mystery at Loch Ness, which I did back in 2016 after I visited there in 2015. And I kind of got my feet wet in that way, and I moved a little bit towards the Bigfoot realm with a web series called Sasquatch Out of the Shadows, which are also sort of a documentary series I've been doing since around 2016 as well. And what motivated me for Champ in particular was I was always interested in it. So I grew up in New England, just one state over in New Hampshire from Vermont, where Lake Champlain is located, and that's really what sort of inspired me to do it. And conversations with researchers such as Scott, Will, and Katy kind of cemented that, and I had been speaking with Seth about doing a project for Small Town Monsters, and around this time last year, all the pieces sort of fell into place, and in July, actually, we started filming On the Trail of Champ on location.
Is there anything about these legends of Champ that you find particularly fascinating? Sort of when you sit back and you're having a glass of wine and it's a warm evening, there's a fire going. Is there anything that really strikes you that you think, that is compelling?
Yes, yeah, I think the human aspect is what really, not just with Champ, but with many of the other mysteries I've covered in some of my documentaries, that's what really intrigues me. And with Champ in particular, of course, you have the stories of the Native Americans, the the petroglyphs, and then the local stories that date back in the 1800s when the newspapers started talking about it. And a lot of that is covered in the series, in the documentary series, which I really tried to convey, bringing in the human aspect and then tying that into the modern human kind of interactions with Champ and the lake monster of that nature, and how it impacts the local communities and the areas, and how people sort of embrace it, because it's, people like living beside or alongside a monster. That's something out of mythology. So it's interesting to see the modern implications.
Yeah, and one of the things I noticed about the film, and it is beautifully shot. There's very excellent cinematography. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not flattering because I need to. I have no self-interest whatsoever in the promotion of this film. It's how I feel. So I think it's very well shot. You focus on the individuals, and we've got two of the three. From my point of view, main characters on the show tonight. We've got obviously Scott and Katy, and Will is the other person you mentioned. How do Champ researchers differ from Bigfoot researchers, would you say, in your experience? Is there a different methodology, a different passion? What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a little bit that's the same and a little bit that's contrasting. I think obviously the creature that they're after is different, of course, and there's a lot less of them. And that's something I also try to emphasize in the series, is that there's so many people that are investigating things like Bigfoot and UFOs and other aspects of the paranormal, whereas with Champ, there's essentially only a handful of people. I think a lot of the methodology is somewhat similar, but different, because they're dealing with an aquatic environment. Sure, some of them may use the sort of the hidden cameras, the trail cameras, the underwater cameras, that sort of thing you might find in other aspects of Bigfoot research or other research with trail cameras, but it's certainly a different ballgame, and it's a lot more challenging, I feel, than going out into the woods. Sure, it's difficult to be out in the woods and remote mountain ranges. I'm not saying that's an easy task at all. I've been on plenty of Bigfoot expeditions with researchers, and dealing from everything from ticks to extreme heat and black flies. But being out on the lake presents totally different logistical challenges, from boats and dealing with all the issues associated with that to scuba divers and things like that. So there's a lot that's definitely overlapping, but it's a totally different ballgame.
When you think about the researchers that you featured, and obviously we've got Scott and Katy on tonight, what do you think strikes you? What do you think the film has tried to come across and tell in terms of their story? What message are we looking for, Aleksandar?
I think the big part is the passion. I think I really tried to focus on that, to show that these people, they get a bad rep. So everyone who's into these sort of subjects, they are scapegoated by the media as being lunatics or fringe weirdos. But I think they're just normal people who, many since they were children, just like myself, have had an interest in these subjects and have actualized that childhood, that dream or an experience that they had that brought them into this, and they take it to the next level and kind of make it almost like a life's goal, searching for these things. And I really try to portray that with the utmost respect, because I think there's enough of these sort of media hit pieces and these Hollywood reality TV kind of trashy shows that make people look bad and crazy. And I just wanted an honest portrayal that these people are just normal, but they have, something that drives them. We all have something that drives us. Filmmaking is that for me, coupled with the exploring the unknown. This is my way of kind of researching, if you will, mysteries like Champ and other things, but through a lens. But these people go out there and do the hard work, going through the swamps and the waters, and I think that's something I really tried to portray as accurately as I could without making a sort of freak show about it.
Yeah, and I think you did a very good job of that. I think, I've seen enough films where you have the characters who are portrayed as hapless eccentrics in a snarky way, and you didn't do that. And that's why I would give this film my personal strongest recommendation, because you made a good film. It was put together well, excellently shot, and you did convey the passion of the people who research Champ. So let's talk a little to those people, if we may. Let's start with you, Scott. Scott, are you normal?
I assume so. Most people seem to think I am.
And how about you, Katy? Are you normal?
Same answer, really. I mean, I would suggest that I am. I mean, the thing is, like, the difference between someone saying, "Oh, are you normal?" I don't think really anybody's normal. What is normal? You know.
It's an evocative question. I know you both very well, and I agree with Aleksandar's analysis that you are balanced people who have different and individual passions, and obviously you research in different ways, but you are both worthy of respect. So I want to talk to you individually about, you've both had sightings of Champ, and I want people to understand a little bit about the creature and what it may be. So, Scott, do you want to tell me a little about what you saw? I know you sent me some sketches earlier on, which I was looking through. Do you want to tell me a little bit about what you saw and when you saw it, please?
Yep. It was July of 1994. There's a park on the Burlington waterfront called Battery Park. It sits up on a bluff. I was looking out from a park bench on that bluff out toward a little rock in the lake called Rock Dunder. On the left side of Rock Dunder, probably about 1,000 yards out, I was watching this through binoculars. There were a couple of buoys out that way, and I saw this large mound-like object come up out of the water with a smaller object on the very top of it. Then it turned and swam to the right for about 10 to 20 seconds. And when it turned, you saw a similar mound-like shape, and on the right end of it was what looked like some kind of a flipper. And the easiest interpretation I could come up with was that it was swinging on its side, and it had this flipper-like appendage up in the air, and then it stopped, and it just sank or dived. From what I saw, it looked like it just sank like a rock, and it was gone. But I watched this through binoculars. It was a garbage bag color. I sat around and waited for some boats to come by, and I saw a boat come by shortly after that was about the same size as the mound. A few blocks away from the park, there is a boat dock called Perkins Pier. I walked around Perkins Pier looking for similar boats, and I finally found one, and I estimated that it was about 15 feet long. So based on that, I estimate this object was 15 feet long.
So when we talk about that, Scott, obvious question, I know, but I'm going to put it to you. Why couldn't it be an aquatic animal or a log? Why is it Champ?
Well, it could have been. I'm just saying that it, to me, it looked like an animal. And it was highly unusual, and I did get a good look at it. Unfortunately, I didn't have a camera with me, or I would have taken a photograph. But from the distance I was away, I was probably like 1,000 yards away from this thing. So if I'd have taken a picture with a regular camera, it would have probably just been a little blob that wouldn't have meant much, But it generally reminded me of a leatherback turtle in its color and the skin texture, and and most of the reports of Champ, where they get a good look at it, seem to be describing some sort of plesiosaurish animal. And I could see this possibly being a plesiosaur with its neck and head under the water, swimming with its flipper up in the air. And a lot of marine animals do this to thermoregulate their temperature. They either stick the flipper up in the air to get rid of excess heat, or they stick it up when the sun is shining to actually gain heat through their flippers. So I suspect that's what this creature was doing, There are lake sturgeons in the lake that get about 7 feet long, but this was much larger than a lake sturgeon. So
okay, good
there
stuff.
you go. Yeah.
Good. So, Katy, same question to you. Tell us about your sighting.
Okay, let's see. It was August of 2012. I was camping at a place called Button Bay State Park in Ferrisburg, Vermont, which is where I live now. I had 3 friends with me, and 2 of the 3 were Bigfoot researchers. So they're like, oh, let's go out and look for Bigfoot. I'm like, hey, we're going to find Champ, like, hopefully. So I was just sitting there in my chair eating breakfast. It was a late breakfast, around 11:30 in the morning. And I looked out into the bay. It was a fairly calm, morning. And I saw this dark-colored hump rise to the surface of the water. It was like basically a blackish-brown color. It was kind of hard to tell, really, because of the direction of the sun. I mean, that's the best I could describe it, was a blackish-brown color. And I'm looking at this thing, and I'm like, okay, what in the world could this be? I'm kind of going through my mind. Okay, is it a log that just happened to pop up? Is it a big otter? Is it a giant eel? It just didn't fit into anything I'd ever seen before. And living in the ocean state in Rhode Island, most of my life, being on the ocean, seeing whales and dolphins and other phenomena, boat wakes, it just didn't fit into anything I'd ever seen before. And I'm thinking, could this really be Champ? Because it was, I would say, there was actually a sailboat moored in the background, and I used that for scale size, and that was around 15 feet in length. So I said, well, I guess it's not any of these other things unless there's some record eel in here or whatever. And what I found particularly interesting was when it started moving from the left side of the bay to the right, when it got to the point where it was going faster, it started moving in this really strange vertical undulation. And it almost looked like it was having like muscle spasms. It was the weirdest thing, like this vibrating look to it and just like vertically undulating in the strangest way. And I just couldn't believe what I was seeing, so I ran to the car to get my camera. And when I did, it figures it submerged. And I looked at my friends like, did you just see that? And they're like, well, that was different. And they're like, well, it's not Bigfoot. So they were like really into it. I don't know, they just weren't there for Champ. But I mean, I know what I saw, and I know it was something I had never seen before, and it fits into the descriptions of other Champ sightings and eyewitnesses that have had sightings that I have spoken with. So I felt extremely blessed to have this experience on my second day on the lake. It was unbelievable because I'd had this passion for Champ and Nessie and Ogopogo for a very long time, since I was 7 years old. So it was really an amazing experience.
Okay, well, we'll come back onto your different researches in a minute. Aleksandar, I just want to ask you this question, because obviously you have had some experience with lake monsters in different places. What do you think Champ is?
Oh, that's a good question. See, I'm not really sure. I'm sort of conflicted. Of course, as a filmmaker, I try to be as objective as possible, and I have to remain skeptical and portray, I say, both sides of the argument. So the sort of the believer side and a little bit of the skeptical side. I will say,
I
the witness.
Ben Radford's thing. You had some quotes from Ben Radford, which I thought was appropriate. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that was great. I reached out to Ben, and he was great. He sent me he mailed actually a video that he had made of kind of the simulation of a log type creature, or looking like a creature for the recreation of the Sandra Mancy photo. So that was something good to add into it. But in terms of what Champ could or couldn't be, I mean, I'm not really sure. I think some of the theories that the researchers have are really interesting. My personal favorite one, I'm not endorsing it, but I just think it's cool, is the giant turtle theory, that it's some sort of huge turtle-like creature, and some folks that have seen certain videos have said that's what they think it most likely is. I think that's just very fascinating. That almost seems cooler to me than a plesiosaur, but I'm not really sure. I know for a fact that the people that I spoke to, Katy and Scott included, and many of the eyewitnesses I spoke to, probably about a dozen eyewitnesses altogether, some of them had some sightings that were truly unbelievable, but they really firmly believed what they saw. And that was, I've seen that with other subjects as well, with Bigfoot, people that have had these encounters that are not easily explained. And, especially people that have grown up in these environments. They've been fishing their entire lives on a lake like Lake Champlain. They know what's in there, and when they get something that shocks them, it's really interesting. And that's what keeps me going, is the eyewitnesses. So I haven't had any personal sightings or experiences that I can really say are 100% definitive with Champ, but I know for a fact that the people I've spoken to are very sincere, and I don't think they're making up the stories. I think it's easy to tell when someone's kind of creating a story just for its sensationalism, and the people I spoke to were sincere and genuine.
Yeah, and I think both Scott and Katy are sincere. I don't have any doubts about that. But I'm a lawyer, or was a lawyer, and I love pinning people down. So I'm going to ask you this. On a percentile scale, how likely is Champ to exist, in your opinion, in whatever form it takes?
Sure. I'd say probably 60-40 or 70-30. I'm somewhere along those lines. Because even if Champ is not a plesiosaur or some sort of very exotic creature, even something like a giant eel or some sort of giant other known animal, that would be interesting in itself. Even if it was a 15 to 20 foot long sturgeon, I mean, that's something that's rarely ever seen in a lake like Lake Champlain. So that in itself would be extraordinary. So I think there's some aspect of Champ that has to exist. What it is, like I said, I can't really speak to that. Obviously, the researchers are in much better positions to say that. They've had the visual element to it, and they've spoken to probably dozens more witnesses than I have. So they ultimately would have to say. But I lean towards it probably being something in that lake that is very unusual.
Good stuff. Scott, what is Champ?
Well,
what is Champ?
I don't know. All I know is that I saw something unusual, and a whole lot of other people have seen something unusual. And the general picture that it emerges from the bulk of these sightings is some kind of a large animal with a big back and a long neck and a small snake-like or dinosaurish-looking head. And the best thing that we know about from all the animals that have existed that and from the fossil record and exist now, the best fit is some kind of a long-necked plesiosaur. So, you can't take eyewitness testimony at face value, but you also have videos and photographic evidence to back up the same image. So, based on the photographic evidence with the eyewitness testimony evidence, all I can say is if it's not a plesiosaur, it's a remarkable case of convergent evolution, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Now, Katy, what is Champ? Tell me.
Good question. I don't have my behind stuck in the mud about what I think Champ is. And I think what's really interesting about us, like Scott and myself and Will, we all have our own ideas of what Champ could possibly be. Everybody has their own ideas, and that's what makes this field so interesting. I think that's what makes it such an amazing story to share as Alex portrayed it in this film. I don't think that Champ is in the known fossil record. I have done so much research and going through so many encyclopedias of prehistoric reptiles and amphibians, and according to what I've seen, what other people have seen, it is it could be a plesiosaur. Anything's possible. But I don't really put it into perspective saying, it's a zeuglodon or a plesiosaur or a Tanystropheus. I honestly believe that Champ is not in the known fossil record, but I do believe that these animals are either reptile or amphibian or possibly a hybrid of both. A lot of the eyewitness reports, particularly in the marsh systems, which is really interesting, something kind of outside the box, seem to indicate that these animals are mostly nocturnal. There's an eye shine that they give off when a light is shown upon them, and that is a thing called tatum lucidum, which is a Latin word for bright carpet. And, nocturnal animals, mostly nocturnal animals, give off this reddish, yellowish type of eye shine. And also there's been reports of Champ sunbathing. That's a reptilian trait as well as an amphibian trait. So it's kind of a toss-up between the two. I'm almost leaning a little bit towards the amphibian side now. I'm not quite sure. But just by using those reports that I've gathered, the experiences that I have had myself, and kind of fitting that into like a identikit, a pieces of the puzzle fitting together, would indicate that these animals are either reptile or amphibian or possibly a hybrid of both. I really don't know. That's just an idea of what I believe. But I don't think any of us are correct because we have not discovered this species yet. So I think it's great that everybody has different ideas to present to the world, really.
Okay. I mean, when one of the things I was thinking when you were talking about the eye shine is tangential, but it's interesting. Is when you go to Central Africa, for example, and there's a lot of crocodiles about, and you shine any sort of light or a torch in their direction, their eyes glow bright red, and it's really quite sinister. But I want to talk to you about evidence now, because you both postulated slightly different theories, and obviously in different ways. Scott, when you, other than your own sighting, I don't want to dwell on that again too much just yet, but when you think about what the most compelling evidence is for the existence of Champ, is there anything that really sticks in your mind, and if so, why?
Well, I try to put emphasis on the photographic evidence. And to me, the three best pieces of evidence are Sandra Manzi's photograph, Peter Baudet's video from 2005, and Eric Olson's video from 2009. Now, in all three cases, there are people that have questioned the validity of what these images show, but ultimately, they do look like animals of some sort, and they're not easily categorized as the known fauna accepted to live in Lake Champlain. So,
well, let's pause there.
Beyond that, without physical evidence to verify the existence of Champ, that's the best thing we have to work with right now.
Okay, great. Let's focus on one thing, if we may. Let's focus on the Sandra Manzi photograph, because that's talked about a lot, and obviously in the film Ben Radford, I think, postulated his own rebuttal of it. So explain to our listeners what that photograph actually represents to you, if you will.
Well, it looks very much like the back and the neck and the head of a plesiosaur. The long-necked plesiosaur was looking over its back. There was a lot of debate back in the 80s as to whether a plesiosaur's neck would be able to assume that posture, and I've done some research into that in scientific literature, and I was able to determine that it probably would be able to do its neck like that, assume that position. And I also found a photograph of an Asian monitor lizard with a head that looks almost exactly like the head-like object in the Manzi photograph. So those two factors together, I think are good evidence pointing in the other direction. Now, I've also seen lots of wood debris that is basically dinosaur, plesiosaur shaped as well. So, we can't go back in a time machine and verify what that object is. So it could be a piece of wood, but it's a remarkably animalish looking piece of wood. So I think that it probably was an animal myself, but that's my subjective opinion. So.
No, that's fine, and obviously Ben Radford, for the purposes of
Ben's a friend of mine. We just disagree on some things, but
yeah,
he's even let me write articles about Champ in the Skeptical Inquirer. So.
Okay, and that's good. Let me just enunciate what he actually says, though, for people. So he says, in his opinion, he thinks it might be a piece of wood. Obviously, you consider it to be more animal-like, but I know you both respect one another.
Oh,
Katy,
absolutely.
what about you? Well, Katy, is there anything that you think is compelling evidence that's different to the sort of things that Scott has talked about?
Well, I have to agree with Scott on the photographic evidence as well as video evidence. The Baudet footage is amazing, and unfortunately, the entire footage was not put on ABC News, which I wish it was. There's a few that have seen the whole tape, and but from what I see in that film, just a little snippet of what they use on the news, It totally fits into the Mansi photo, as well as I had a head and neck sighting myself a couple of years ago, and unfortunately the camera that I had at the time wouldn't zoom in. I was just so frustrated, and now I have a really good camera, so I'm hoping it will happen again. But, I mean, just all the eyewitness reports, it's, to me, there's no way that the Mansi photo is a piece of wood. I mean, that's someone's opinion, that's fine, but from what I've seen and by everybody's, reports that I've gathered and things like that, it's just the skin texture, the long neck with a small head. I mean, just everything seems to fit together. And for a piece of wood to look like that, it's kind of, I mean, yes, it can happen, but sorry, there's a train going by behind my house if you can hear that.
No, don't worry about it.
It's a little loud. But, yeah, I mean, I would say for photographic and video evidence, those have to be the best. I also have a couple videos of my own that I've gotten on the lake, as well as hydrophone recordings. And I think the sounds are really interesting and something that needs to be further studied. Bioacoustic work, there's just so much to find out, and, only so much is covered in the world of biology. So just to keep doing the hydrophone work and using underwater cameras to try to get a visual, I think that is really important to correlate both of them to verify that's exactly what is making these sounds as well. So I would say those are probably the most compelling pieces, I would say.
Very good stuff. Now, Scott, obviously the future of your research, you work with Will, who's also featured on the film, and you talked a little bit about biopsy darts. I want to know where you see your research taking you in the future in relation to Champ.
Well, I'm trying to concentrate on finding a type specimen if it's out there. That's the only thing that's going to change things and make this a real animal.
And how are you going to do that?
To the scientific community. Well, the two most least harmful ways to do that are pray that you get lucky to get close enough to one while it's at the water surface and get a plug of tissue with a biopsy dart, because you'd be able to get a DNA sequence from that and figure out what kind of animal it is, and you'd be able to get population structure, genetic viability of the population of animals from that same tissue sample. Now, a little plug of tissue would not qualify as a type specimen, I don't think. I don't think there's any precedent of just a piece of skin being used as a type specimen. However, the other strategy is to look for bones of dead ones either on the bottom or in potential caves in the sides of the lake under the water. Now, there are two caves that are above ground now from the Champlain Sea period that I have been looking at, and hopefully there are ones that are still underwater. Now, sea turtles occasionally blunder into caves and either can't find their way out again or they purposely go in them to die. So if we're dealing with some kind of big aquatic reptile, it's entirely possible that there are bones of dead champs, if they exist, in these places. Now, a few bones of a recently dead animal would qualify as a type specimen. So if you found bones and you had a tissue sample together, that would definitely qualify as a type specimen and would put it in the zoology books. But that's a big if. We got to find it first. So
yeah, it's a big
that's what I want to concentrate on.
Okay, good. Katy, how about you?
Well, basically, I have many different strategies that I'm trying to use to. I mean, you have to use more than one type of strategy if you really want to figure something out. So I set up a lot of plot cameras. Before I was just setting up the game cameras, which they take, photographs motion detected. But with the plot cameras, every 5 seconds it will snap a photo or take a video clip. Because there's been times I set up game cameras and something has gone by and the other camera caught it, but that one particular camera didn't catch it. So I'm like, geez, how many cameras do I have to set up in the same spot at the right angle? It's very difficult sometimes it's technology. You just never know if it's going to work when you want it to. So I'm concentrating on plot cameras, excuse me, as well as doing more work with the hydrophone system, listening for any sounds that are totally different from the known fauna in the lake, and just anything that's totally different other than, you'll hear the occasional fish finder and other species of fish in the lake, but to differ from that, that's another thing that I'm going to be concentrating more on, as well as underwater cameras, stationary cameras underwater. And the thing is, too, with my research, a lot of times when I go out on the lake early in the morning, I'll actually comb the beach and look for bones. I actually found a really strange bone. I don't know what it is. It actually looks like some kind of a cow bone or something. I have yet to identify it. I'm hoping it's champ bone, but I really don't. It doesn't look like any type of reptile or amphibian type of bone. I've looked it up online and I can't figure it out. So I'll have to send that off somewhere to get that checked out. But I do look for any type of, fossil remains. I mean, if we found a fossil of this species in this lake, it would just be total confirmation right there. And just like Scott said, any type of biological sample is what we would need, whether one would wash up on the shore, which I think maybe one day it could happen. Unfortunately, it hasn't happened yet. So I try to work, basically think about outside the box ideas that no one else has ever tried. I do a lot of work in the marsh systems, particularly at night with a very large headlamp, and it's pretty scary out there in the dark. But and I have a thermal imaging camera, night vision binoculars, all kinds of great stuff. So I just think different types of methodology, it will solve this mystery. But like Scott said, it's one of those things where we have to have a biological specimen to prove that they exist. So.
Okay, so when we think about that, so Katy, I'll ask you in a variance of this in a second, Scott. But you're doing all this research, and you obviously operate different ways, but you're both very, very dedicated and passionate. And anybody who's listening to that can see or hear that, rather. Mr. and Mrs. Smith are on holiday, and they give Aleksandar a call because they've just found it on the beach. Aleksandar films it because that's what he's going to do. You're doing all this work. How do you feel, Katy? Do you feel annoyed, vindicated, frustrated, happy? How do you feel?
I would actually feel really happy, just because it would prove that what we're all seeing is not this figment of our imagination. And the most important thing to me about my research and what we all do, like Scott, myself, Will, I think the most important thing is protection for this species, because they are obviously extremely rare. And that's just the most important thing to me, is to protect them, and that will ensure further protection for them.
What would you think, Scott?
Well, I'd be overjoyed. I mean, I've been looking for a quarter of a century. I want to solve the mystery, not perpetuate it.
So, when
if there's nothing there, I want to know that too.
And I understand that. When's the mystery going to be solved, Scott? When is it going to be solved, do you think?
When somebody finds physical evidence of an exotic animal that matches the reports, I guess. That's a tall order. It may never happen. I don't know.
Does it matter to you who finds it?
Do what?
Does it matter to you who finds the evidence?
No, not really. It's very elusive. I've looked as hard as anybody, so I don't know.
How about you, Katy? What do you think?
It honestly doesn't matter to me who finds biological specimens, say one washes up or whatever. Like I said, the most important thing to me is to have this proven for further protection of the species. And it doesn't stop there. That's the most important thing, too. I mean, there could be a way that, they are very elusive, obviously, but there could be some kind of knack somewhere that we figure out how to attract them to a boat. I mean, I'm not quite sure what that would be. But if that was the case, you look at shark tagging. I did that in the North Atlantic a couple years ago, and it was amazing to tag this mako shark and watch on the internet to where it was going all the way to Bermuda, down to New Jersey, back here, and it was just amazing. And I think, just imagine tagging champs and seeing actually where they are. It would be. I think that's where the work really starts, is when they are discovered, and then it's just a whole new ball game. It's preservation, conservation, just like cetaceans, whales and dolphins. So I think it's just the tip of the iceberg, really, if they are discovered.
And when we're talking about the creatures, obviously we touched on the theory that some of them are logs. A lot of people dismiss the idea of it. Some say it's hoaxes, some say it's logs, some say it's misidentification of animal species and or wakes, which can look very like humps, as you both know. Scott, if I say, it's all made up and you are delusional in some way, what do you say to that?
Well, all the things that you just described are part of the, quote, sightings record. And while you look at the long history and there's a lot of consensus between the great majority of the unambiguous reports, but mixed up in that, there are marginal reports that are probably all the things that you just described. I think that there's a small core from the sightings record that is very impressive, that seems to back up the video or the claimed video evidence. The thing is, you have to understand, a lot of forensic psychology work has shown that human memory and the human brain doesn't work like a video camera. That the further in time you get away from an event, the more psychological influences from outside can reconfigure what you think happened. We've all had the experience of trying to remember a scene from an old movie, and maybe after 20, 30 years, we see the movie again and realize that we didn't remember it the right way, that there was something different. And that's the same with monster sightings, I'm sure, or any other event. You've seen how people can be mistaken, with criminal trials about they thought it was this person, but later on it was shown, well, no, this guy just kind of looks like the guy you thought it was, and things of that nature. So, in my opinion, until we find some tangible physical evidence, the best thing we have to work with is the video evidence, the recordings, hydrophone recordings, whatever they are, and stuff of that nature. That's where the emphasis on trying to analyze what's going on here should be placed, with the eyewitness testimony as backup, if you follow me, in order of priorities.
Yep.
Because hard evidence like a photograph or something physical, you can go back and re-examine it over and over and over again. You can't go back in time and verify an eyewitness report. And I'm not saying that people are lying. I'm just saying that you just cannot do that. The only tangible evidence I have of my sighting are those drawings that I made the same day it happened.
Okay, good.
That's the value of those is I made them a few hours after it actually happened. So they're fairly close to what I actually remember.
Yeah, and that's an important evidential point when you want contemporaneous accounts from eyewitnesses and how things can change. Katy, is there anything you'd add to what Scott's saying in any way?
Well, I mean, I believe the same thing. I mean, with memory, it's one of those things. You think that maybe this particular thing happened, and then the human brain isn't always right. A long time, you think that you had seen something with this particular feature, and then you figure out later on, say if someone did take a photograph of something, go, oh, wait a minute, that's not exactly what I thought it was at at this moment in time. But with the Champ sighting, what I find interesting is that there's a big sign over in Port Henry, New York, and there's just so many people, families that have seen something strange, people that have grown up on Lake Champlain, fishermen, just people that are familiar with any type of aquatic phenomena, whether it's boat wakes, logs, sturgeon. And yeah, I believe that there are probably quite a few sightings that were either sturgeon or boat wakes or seiche, wave, logs, who knows. I'm not saying that every single one was Champ. But these stories go all the way back to the Abenaki and Iroquois natives. And these people, they were on the lake all the time. And to me, there's just so many stories with Bigfoot as well, where the natives have seen, large hairy creatures. So I think, you add into all those sightings of something, they all just seem to fit together. And then, yeah, I do believe that some of these sightings are, logs or otters or whatever. It's totally possible because from far away, it's really hard to tell if you don't have binoculars or you don't have a really good camera with, say, like a 60 zoom like I do. There's been times where I've been, on the other side of the lake, on the Vermont side of Lake Champlain, looking over to New York, and I'll be like, oh, what is that? And it's either a cormorant or a family of geese in a row, and it looks, from far away, it looks like multiple humps going through the water. So, but yeah, I believe that the majority of sightings, people are definitely seeing something, and that's only by going from what I have experienced myself.
Hey guys,
this is
my
question.
Actually, first you, Katy, if you don't mind, I'm gonna put you on the spot here a little bit.
Okay.
Got to put your money on it, one way or the other. Does Champ give live birth in the water, or does it lay eggs on land?
Now, that's a thing that it's kind of debatable, but in my opinion, I believe that these animals give live birth. As Scott knows, plesiosaurs, and you look in the fossil record, there was a fossil of a plesiosaur with a fetus inside. You could see it, and they originally had thought that plesiosaurs gave birth by laying eggs on land, but finding out through the fossil record, with seeing this fossil that was not the case. They actually give live birth. They could be laying eggs. I really don't know. You would think, like, say, an alligator or something like that. If they made nests out in the marsh, you think you would find those with eggs in them, or possibly like a turtle, they would be burying their eggs in the sand or whatever. But I would bet money on that they most likely give live birth.
I see. There's a really good chance that we give live birth. Well, Scott, a quick question for you. Is eDNA going to be the tool that unravels the mystery?
I hope so. They're about to do an experiment over at Loch Ness that ought to go a long way to settling the question with eDNA. They've already used the same technology to find shark species that they thought were missing from a certain area. So apparently there's a lot of promise with this. But the thing is, there's a difference in looking for a known species and looking for a possible large animal that you don't really know what it is.
I agree.
That makes
different
the proposition a lot more murkier. Not to mean that it doesn't hold great potential, but we just have to wait and see,
Certainly.
Touching on that, I would mention that there is some possible plesiosaur fossil DNA fragments allegedly from Australia. I'm trying to find out more information about it. All I have is one newspaper article about it, but that have some relevance to this. I just don't know.
Well, that's certainly very interesting and something worth pursuing. And Aleksandar, I get to you quickly before we're about to run out of time here this evening. I could go on and on about this subject. It's certainly something we all share a passion for. I could rave on and on about the quality of this 5-part miniseries. I was fortunate enough to just watch it, and I'm stunned at the sheer amount of information and the quality of production and the filmmaking. I have so many questions for you, but perhaps most importantly, you know, the human element thing, you touched on that earlier, and that is something that's very real, and you really handled that so well in the making of this, and there's quite a number of fantastic interviews with eyewitnesses, and I was wondering, was there one eyewitness that you interviewed during this process that really stuck out to you and really moved you?
Yeah, I think I really enjoyed Vincent DiTilio's interview and also Frank Horton. So they would have been some of the interviews featured in episode 2. Vincent's in particular because it happened in the 1950s. So this was a lot older of a sighting than any of the other ones I got to listen to. And this sighting took place before there was really a modern champ cultural phenomenon. That didn't happen until a couple decades later. You know, people had heard about it, but I don't think it was as big. You know, there hadn't been any in search ofs or any kind of TV show specials or anything about it at that time. And that's what was really interesting was he said that, you know, the 6 of them that saw it, they decided not to talk about it for, 20 years because they just didn't want to be seen as crazy until he said people started seeing these things, and that's when they became more receptive and open to talking about it. Also, Frank Horton's interview was particularly interesting because of the circumstances it happened in. I was at the Champ Days event in Fort Henry, New York, videoing, getting some B-roll of a Champ parade float they have out there, and some guy comes up behind me and is kind of like, "Hey, you getting some good pictures of the Champ there?" And I say, "Yes." And he says, "Well, I've actually seen Champ." And he started talking about it, and I realized, wow, can I interview you? And he was like, yeah, sure. I mean, I haven't really ever told my story on video, and his story was pretty compelling. He was the one that saw it on a beach laying there, and as they drove down, him and his buddy, towards it, it actually ended up going in the water, and he had a pretty vivid description. So those were 2 really interesting sightings. All the sightings. I mean, I spoke to Sandra Mancy as well over the phone. They were all really compelling, but I think those 2 stuck out for me.
That's a fantastic answer. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Now, Aleksandar, I just want to make it very clear to people how they might go about getting this film, how much it costs. So do you want to just go through the different methods that people can do that?
Sure. So, like I said, it'll be coming out on June 20th, and if you go to smalltownmonsters.com, you can actually pre-order the DVD. And it's about $20 for the DVD because that is 5 episodes, and also included in the DVD are some bonus features, some kind of behind-the-scenes footage, some fun stuff like that. And then vidi.space, which is a streaming site. I don't know the pricing on there. I'm not sure, but I assume it works like other subscription sites where you pay sort of a monthly or yearly fee and you get access to, whatever content's available on there. And from what I've seen so far, they have some pretty cool stuff. They've got a bunch of cryptid and paranormal documentaries that are on there already. And later in the summer, this documentary series will be available on other streaming sites as well, most likely Amazon, iTunes, other sites as well. But those will be probably the easiest ways to get it. If you're old-fashioned, like I said, you can go to the website and get the DVD hard copy. I know a lot of people like that, so definitely do that. And there's some posters available as well. We're lucky enough to have Stephen Bissett do our poster, which was really awesome. He did the Swamp Thing and many other things.
Great stuff. Scott, will you be on the lake this summer?
Yeah, we're planning an expedition for September.
And who will you be with, and what will be your objective?
Hopefully William. He's kind of dealing with an illness right now, but the plan is for us to be there in September and I'm probably going to be staying for a month. I don't think he could stay that long, but we're going to try to pick up where we left off last summer. We'll see what happens.
Katy, what's your plans over summer?
Well, basically, I live here on the lake, so I'm fortunate to be here all the time, and every day I'm out on the lake with weather permitting, and just going to, like I said, do a lot more hydrophone work as well as using the plot cameras. I have a couple of things up my sleeve to try as experiments. I don't really want to talk about them yet because it's kind of one of those
Katy.
things.
Some secret plans, Katy.
Yes, I've always got something up my sleeve. So, but no, I mean, I'm just curious to see if these little experiments will actually, attract these animals either to the boat or to the plot cameras. So I'm trying a couple of new techniques as well. Going to try to get the drone out there. I do have a drone, but unfortunately it stopped flying, so I have to get that repaired. And with doing this, it's such an expensive endeavor, but it's my true passion. And I mean, it's one of those things where I'm not just obsessed. It really is my life, but I just love it. It's just such an awesome, it's an awesome way to live. I mean, to go after your dream that you've had since you were a child is just amazing. And to, have these experiences that I've had in interviewing other eyewitnesses as well. So I really think the summer is going to be great. And I also look forward to, seeing Scott and Will up here too. It's always nice to collaborate with other researchers. So I'm really looking forward to this summer.
Good stuff. And we'll hear more about your secret plans, no doubt. We'll keep them secret for now. Always a bit of intrigue, always good for the soul. That's what I always say. Aleksandar, what's next for you? What's your plans as you look into the future?
No, that's a good question. I'll be doing a lot more sort of Sasquatch-related stuff. Like I said, I have a sort of recurring web series. I'm going to be looking into some interesting things upcoming and, possibly down the road, maybe continuing with Champ. I don't know. I'd like to definitely. I don't think it's a case closed for myself either. And I will be planning on heading back up to Lake Champlain soon, within, the next couple of months. My brother will actually be attending school in Vermont, so I have every excuse now to visit him on weekends and head out to the lake and scour the sort of area. And I want to check out some of the areas I didn't get to see while I was filming last summer. So the southern parts of the lake and the northern part of the lake towards Canada, so get a little bit of a wholer picture. So that's definitely something I look forward to.
So you're going to be in contact with these guys while you're up there? Find out what they're up to?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to, head out there with Scott and Will and Katy. Of course, I've been up there in the winter as well. This past winter, I did the winter filming, and we were out there with Katy as well. And, I consider both the research groups to be personal friends, Katy, Will, and Scott. And, I really hope to see Will up there especially. I know he's been dealing with some stuff, and he's going to be at the International Cryptozoology Conference that Lauren Coleman is having in September, hopefully, so I'll be there as well. So it would be great to see him and Benjamin Radford and some other people who are in the series actually at the event.
Well, it's good, that, as I say, when I wrap this up, what really struck me about the film, was that it was very well shot at a good pace, and you built it up well. But secondly, that you portrayed them, not both Scott, Katy, and Will, the three main researchers who are featured, in a positive light, and that's refreshing. And I would like to see more of that. It isn't that you believe everything that they say or do. You offer an alternative opinion, but you did that very well. So well done to you. I hope your film's a success. I genuinely do. And Katy and Scott, I love your passion. It's always very infectious. I like speaking to both of you. And it's a pleasure to have had you on the show tonight and be winners, be successful. I wish you all the best of success. And thank you, all three of you, for being with us tonight. On behalf of the show, we really do appreciate you, both as decent, good, honest people and as passionate and committed researchers and filmmakers, respectively. So thank you ever so much, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, thank you for having us on.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Adam.
I truly appreciate it.
Thanks, Adam. And
All
Mike.
right, that's it, guys. Good evening, and we'll be back shortly. Not probably next week. I'll be off to Alaska, risking my life once again. But assuming I survive that, we'll be back the week after. So thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen.